not much has changed in Afghanistan for the better in the past 4 years, as far as from a American point of view.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of Afghans that would argue like, hey, we don't mind the Taliban because we aren't dealing with a foreign military, every single day anymore. I'm sure some people would say that. I think a lot of women in Afghanistan who knew what life was like there before that could go to school and do a bunch of different things. They probably feel a lot different. And I know some of your reporting has covered that. How is life for women in Afghanistan post U.S. withdrawal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a pretty rapid decline. It's again, it just slowly chipping away. It wasn't sort of all at once. It was a slow chipping away of the rights that women had. And I think it's also important to remember that there's sort of two types of Afghan women, so to speak. You've got the ones that were in the cities, like in Kabul, in Herat, where they were exposed to schooling and jobs and, all these things. And then that was stripped away. But there was also Afghan women who lived in villages, and that was never their reality, and that their lives improved when the Taliban came because the fighting essentially diminished. So they felt like they could walk out of their home and go to a market now, that they couldn't do that safely before. And things like jobs and education, and that was sort of never part of their lives anyway. So I think it's always important to remember that we tend to look at Afghan women through the lens of these urban centers, but that's only a portion of the picture in Afghanistan.
A majority of the women in Afghanistan are in cities, though.
Yeah.
Kabul was the fastest growing city in the world for a couple of years there. I think the majority of the Afghanistan's population is in Kabul, but that certainly doesn't mean that women don't exist outside of the population centers.
And it's been painful to sort of see what that's been like in terms of them losing their schooling, and losing education, ability to work, ability just to kind of be more than buried in the basement essentially. And so that's been a really steady decline over the last 4 years to watch. And it wasn't quite like that in the beginning, but you would sort of see it steadily erode. And then I went back for some time 3 years ago now. So that was October of 22, and even at that point, it's had been such a sharp decline from a year earlier. And then what we're seeing now, obviously, is just really unbelievably heartbreaking. And the sad thing is that the international community is certainly powerless to do anything about it. And I think, too, there's a lot of Taliban that I'd met with that also didn't agree with the sort of the ruler of the supreme leader, who is basically setting the tone for
the Taliban is not a monolith.
Yeah. And we don't even know. We've never seen the supreme leader in real life. He's never released an audio message, and I don't know if he exists or if he is.
Do we have a Wizard of the Oz sort of situation
so that's the thing,
here?
Like, okay, well, we're told it's, this one supreme leader, but who is it? Could it be the ISI? Could it be a group of, we just don't know but yet, whoever that figure is
if
the
you
one.
Figure out that the Iranians were behind it the entire time.
We don't know. So, but that figure or figurehead is the one setting all the rules, and there is it's an absolute rule. So there's no ability to kind of argue with that. But, but yeah, the Taliban, there are certainly members of the Taliban that don't agree with that either necessarily, but they don't have a choice but to go with it. And, it's shocking and hard to believe, and it stems from that sort of Pashtun culture and this belief of women needing to be sort of hidden and buried, and the way that Taliban will describe that to you is they see that as protecting women, as being kind to women, as women shouldn't having to be. Why should women be working? They should be, and to them, when they describe it, it's it's not a derogatory thing the way that we think of it is. To them, this is how you protect women, like the same way as they won't necessarily look at me when I'm talking to them. They see that as protecting me. They see that as a sign of respect.
You could make an argument for that, but where you obviously it loses most of us is when you remove the choice.
Absolutely.
It's one thing to say, oh, it's respectful to not look at women or whatever. Like, okay, I could wrap my head around that. But when you say they can't go to school or they can't, well, that's out of respect. Well, if they don't have a choice in the matter, then it's not really respect. It's just power.
You're putting them in a box of how you believe. But it's a totally patriarchal society. And yeah, and what's been frustrating is that it seems to me that the international community just doesn't have any leverage at all to change that.
Or desire. I think there's certainly people that care or can recognize that it's a really bad situation, but they've got their own bad situations they're dealing with. And there's other crises happening around the world where, you know, women are being subjected to horrible things. And, you know, I empathize with somebody that might say like, yeah, what's happening to women in Afghanistan is terrible. Also, what's happening in Ukraine is terrible. Also, what's happening in sub-Saharan Africa is terrible. Also, what's happening in Western China is terrible. Like the list goes on. There's some bad shit happening in a lot of different places. But, you know, with Afghanistan though, we're so invested there because we were for 20 years in both lives and resources, money, all those things. Like, you know, a lot of Americans spent some of their best years in that country. I'm rambling at this point because it's you know, I have a lot of feelings about that place.
I mean, I think anyone who has been in Afghanistan has very strong feelings. It's a hard place to, I mean, this is not politically correct, but this is what Jake, you know, used to say, is that Afghanistan was sort of like the abusive husband, is that you wanted to leave, but you could never leave. Like you just kept going back. And I think that's certainly, you know, as journalists, how we felt about Afghanistan was that it beat us around so many times where we just said, we had enough. This is too frustrating. We don't want to work here, but yet we'd find ourselves back there and back there and back there and totally consuming your life.
Genuinely beautiful place. Some of the most beautiful sights and sunrises, sunsets that I've ever seen have been in the Afghan mountains and the Spingar Mountains. You know, some of the best people I've ever met, some of the worst people on planet Earth, you know. I mean, it's a complex place that you can't paint with a single brush. How do you feel about, I'm sure you've seen it on like Instagram or TikTok, these younger influencers that are going over to Afghanistan now and kind of clearly in sort of collaboration with the Taliban tourism arm, trying to make it seem like a place to go on vacation to. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't think that's particularly wise. Again, you know, I admire the adventurous spirit. It certainly takes a lot of guts to decide that you're going to get up and go to Afghanistan. But I do think that we also need to remember that, and it's not war anymore, but, you know, I'll use the frame war tourism, I guess post-war tourism. You know, that comes with responsibility, I think, when you're in a place of, you know, privilege, as I'm sure a lot of these people are. And I think unless you're going there to be serious about you're informing people of what's happening, you know, but if you're going there to kind of do a promo for the Taliban, then it's kind of gross. Yeah. I mean, you know, you might not be breaking any laws, but it's ethically, you know, I'd question a lot about you doing that, especially, you know, given what has transpired there and what Afghan women are going through. And, you know, it's certainly not a place I would be recommending, you know, for your next vacation.
There's other places to go experience Middle Eastern or Southwest Asian
and it's a shame
culture.
Because I would love everybody to be able to say, you know, Afghanistan is amazing. It certainly is, but I don't think in this particular climate that it's, you know, to kind of go over there and do a promo, you know, in sort of support of the Taliban is, you know, an especially bright thing to do.
Yeah, I follow all these different travel pages and things like that. You know, I love traveling, whether it's for work or personal. I love traveling. I was telling you, I want to go to 100 countries at some point. I'm not even halfway there yet. But, you know, I follow these places. And when those started, you know, these guys that like, you know, you're swiping through and then it pops up, you'll never guess where I'm at. And it's, you know, they've got you know, some traditional dress on and some things like that. And then it zooms out and you're in a truck filled with a bunch of Taliban and they're all like broing out. And you're just like, this is not yes, what you're filming is real there, but it's constructed. They know who you are. You're over there because you have influence. they are trying to influence how them and their country, like you said, Taliban 2.0, some of that sort of stuff, but you're obviously not showing a lot of what the reality is when you're doing something like that. And I guess that's the same about anybody that goes anywhere and does travel material. It's like, oh yeah, people, guess what? Being on a resort on the Dominican Republic is not reality in the Dominican Republic. Like that's a constructed vacation land, So it's not like it only happens in Afghanistan. It just seems particularly reprehensible to me.
Yeah, it's very egregious.